you know, you got to take it back to the time that it was the early 90s. So there wasn't that many hip hop stations. Hot 97 wasn't even born yet in New York. Hot 97 was still a dance station in New York at the time. Power 1490 was on the air. So hip hop hadn't dominated the airwaves. So Power 1490 being in Tucson playing Ice Cube was revolutionary. So people was like, wow.
Well, when you look at right now, the most popular genre in music is urban music. And at that time, there was no representation in Tucson of any type of urban music. And not even that, but the urban culture as a whole was completely unrepresented in Tucson on the radio. Every once in a while, you might be lucky to get an R&B song on KRQ back then, but it really was on no other station that covered the urban, well, actually the hip-hop world like Power 1490 did. No one else did that.
And KRQ wouldn't really play rap. We actually forced KRQ to play rap, but they would still only play it at night. And they would only play the most popular pop cuts, like Coolio or something like that.
You know, I think Power is a little ahead of its time. I really do. I think that when you take a look at from the mid-90s all the way through the 2000s now, you see the impact that rhythmic radio or hip-hop radio, whatever you want to call it, has had. Power was a little ahead of the curve on that. We were, there weren't but a handful of us in the United States, and it quickly became the format du jour, and it stayed that way for over 10 years.
Look how Top 40 changed. Top 40 used to be a real white rock-based format. Now Top 40 stations are doing exactly what the hip-hop stations were doing in the 90s.
It was the only radio station in Tucson that was doing what we were doing at the time. The only station to play rap music, the only station to identify with a culture that until that time nobody had really identified with that particular segment of the audience, the Latinos, the Hispanic, you know, that the whole culture, and Power 1490 embraced that culture.
It was so gratifying to know that there were all these kids, you know, black, white, you know, Mexican kids that were listening to us, you know, and we had crossed everything. It was across, you know, we crossed racial lines, we crossed even age groups.
Even the very small segment of African Americans living in Tucson where there was no outlet for that group of people. And when Power 1490 came on the air, not only did we play the music that represented the culture, but the people who worked at the radio station embraced the culture. We lived it, we breathed it.
If I was going to tell my grandchild about Power 1490, I'd say, look, this was a radio station that was a leader. This was a radio station that had people that were passionate about the music and really passionate about the city of Tucson and pleasing the people of Tucson.
In radio, I think that the greatest key to success is your passion for what you're doing. And I thought 1490, the staff at 1490 were so passionate about what they did that it definitely translated into what you heard on the air.
The station was kind of like the little engine that thought it could. It was a little tiny station, a little tiny frequency that behaved like it was the biggest thing in the world. And I think people really caught on to the idea that, hey, there's something in this town that is actually acting like it doesn't really belong here.
I think one of the reasons that Power 1490 was so successful is, even though it was owned by a company, I mean, technically it was a corporate radio station, being on the AM dial, being harder to pick up, having to put foil on your roof and into your radio, having it not advertised in the mainstream media. I mean, we were essentially thought of as an underground radio station.
I think what was great about it is it could kind of fly under the radar.
At a time in your life where you were searching for your own identity, I think Power 1490 was a very cool thing that a teenager could say that, you know, he had in his pocket to listen to at home.
It was like their own radio station. They found it, they adopted it, it was theirs, and so many people weren't even aware of it, like the establishment people. You know, that's what was kind of cool about it.
I think the people of Tucson that listened to the Power station felt like they were part of a club.
Power 1490 wasn't a station, it was their station, almost like they had, you know, an ownership with it, that, you know, it was part of them.
What I remember, it was like when you listen to it, it was like you're sitting there listening to a friend. You know what I mean? Almost, because back then, there was no station that played the type of music that 1490 played, and there was no station that grabbed the kids in the neighborhood like that station grabbed you. You know what I mean? So it was almost kind of like a friend kind of like taking you by the hand and say, here, listen to me.
We were unique. We were, you know, very grassroots. While other radio stations were giving away cars, yeah, we had T-shirts and CDs, but we were actually at the football games. My show, I'd had the Power 7 at 7 and dedications, but I would actually have guest DJs in from all the different high schools.
Power 1490, it's Killer Keith and Duncan in the studio from Pueblo High School. We have Ruby, Nomi, and Jose. What's up, guys? Get close to mine. There you go. There you go. Well, they're going to be taking your votes down here, 880-1490 for the Power 7 at 7. So why don't you give them a call? Here's Stevie B, In My Eyes, in your Power Station.
We were your friends. You knew us face to face because we were out on the ground. We were in the clubs. We were one-on-one. So we weren't just somebody on the radio. We were, that guy that I hung out with last night.
I think I remember that channel, The Box.
The Box.
The Box. The Box. The Box is the #1.
The Box. The Box.
The Box. The Box. The Box. The Box was going to be pulled from cable, and they started. There was a demonstration over at Zips on Broadway, I think, with Bruce St. James. Let's bring back the Box. It was very much a grassroots-oriented kind of audience, and at that time, I don't think people quite understood that hip hop had really become part of the culture.
Tucson at the time was dominated by country music, elevator music, oldies, and country. Did I say country? And that was what dominated the market in Tucson. It was all on the FM dial. So to take a bunch of people and steal them from a really good FM signal and then put them on this little grainy AM signal and then keep them there was just amazing.
I think that was another thing that made it kind of cool, because it was on AM and so much of the focus was on the FM stations and the growth of FM at the time, that I think it allowed the station to flourish, again, with that connection directly to the listeners.
One thing you have to remember about Power 1490 and when it was on, the early 90s, there was no Facebook or MySpace or Twitter. If you wanted to find good music, hip-hop music, top 40 music, you had to find it on the radio. And the place to find it was on the AM dial.
People were trying to dictate what the listeners were willing to listen to. Like, oh, well, it has to be an FM station, it has to be in stereo, and it has to be crystal clear. As opposed to, let's say, going forward like YouTube today. People say, well, nobody would watch a a movie on a little screen. Nobody, and it has to be shot with an HD camera. People on YouTube now watching, you get, 13 million viewers watching something, And so I think that's what we did at 1490.
The signal for FM was a lot stronger. You get it in stereo, it's a lot cleaner, no snapping, hissing, and popping. But Power 1490 was this AM station that actually did something.
Nobody paid attention to the sound, the actual quality of the sound. They were listening and they were jamming.
For an AM station to come up and be one of the top leading stations in the market, that's unheard of.
I mean, at one point, I believe we was quoted as being the only station in America on the AM dial that was still playing current music of that format and being successful at it.
And it's like, when I got down, it's like, man, this is an AM station, but it has greater impact than any of the FM stations in the whole state. You know what I mean? It was amazing, it was amazing,
Power proved the AM radio, at least then, was not dead.